My landlord raised the rent overnight, sneering, "If you can't afford it, then get out." Furious, I did some digging and discovered he hadn't filed his property taxes in years. A month later, his house was seized by the government. When he realized I was behind it, he collapsed onto the curb, screaming, "You destroyed me." I've been living in a modest apartment in Chicago for a few years. The building had its quirks, creaky floors, occasional plumbing issues, but it was home. My landlord, Mr. Barnes, was a middle-aged man who always seemed more interested in collecting rent than maintaining the property. One evening, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Mr. Barnes standing there with a smug expression. He handed me a letter stating that my rent would increase by 20% starting next month. Shocked, I asked why. "It's the market rate," he said dismissively. "If you can't afford it, you should start looking for another place." I was furious. I had always paid my rent on time and taken care of the apartment. This sudden hike felt unfair and exploitative. Determined not to be bullied, I decided to do some research. I started by looking into tenant rights in Chicago. I discovered that landlords are required to provide a 30-day notice for rent increases over a certain percentage. Mr. Barnes had given me exactly 30 days, so he was within his rights. But something didn't sit right. I decided to dig deeper into public records regarding the property. After some searching, I found that Mr. Barnes hadn't paid property taxes on the building for several years. In Cook County, unpaid property taxes can lead to the property being sold at a tax sale. This meant that Mr. Barnes was pocketing our rent money without fulfilling his obligations as a property owner. Armed with this information, I contacted the Cook County Treasurer's office to report the delinquency. They informed me that they would investigate the matter. A few weeks later, I noticed a notice posted on the building's entrance stating that the property was scheduled for a tax sale due to unpaid taxes. Mr. Barnes was livid. He confronted me, suspecting that I had something to do with it. I didn't deny it. I told him that tenants have rights and that landlords need to fulfill their responsibilities. He threatened to evict me, but given the circumstances, I knew he had no legal standing. So, after Mr. Barnes found out his building was headed to auction because of unpaid taxes, he didn't go quietly. Not at all. A few days after the notice went up, I started noticing weird things. Small at first. A plumber showed up at my apartment, said he was scheduled to do emergency pipe replacements. I never asked for that. Then 2 days later, my mailbox lock was busted open and half my mail was gone. I asked my neighbors. Turns out no one else had surprise plumbing visits or broken mailboxes. Just me. I knew it was Barnes trying to intimidate me. He must have figured I tipped off the county. He wasn't dumb, just lazy and sloppy with paperwork. But now, with his back against the wall, he was getting mean. Then came the real hit. One morning, I opened my door to find a 3-day notice to vacate taped to it. No envelope, just flapping there like a threat. I wasn't behind on rent. I hadn't broken any rules. But Barnes filed the notice anyway. I took a photo of it, then called a tenant rights lawyer. Free consultation. The lawyer was calm, told me not to worry. "He's retaliating," she said. "Totally illegal. Keep paying rent. Document everything." So I did. I took pictures of every notice, recorded phone calls when he left voicemails threatening more consequences, and kept every receipt. Then came the big twist. One of the neighbors, Ms. Reed, an older lady who lived down the hall and kept to herself, came to my door. She looked rattled. "He's digging, you know," she said in a low voice. "He asked me about you. Said he was trying to find something on you to even the score." I thanked her. My stomach was in knots. What did he think he could find? A week later, I got the answer. A letter came in the mail. No return address. Inside was a copy of a social media post from 5 years ago, one where I had made a joke about landlords. It wasn't even that harsh. But stapled to it was a note scribbled in red ink. "I've got eyes. Keep pushing and I'll push back harder." At that point, I realized something. This man wasn't going to stop until I was out. He didn't just want rent money, he wanted to win. But here's the part that made it all go sideways. In all my digging about Barnes, I'd mostly been looking at property taxes. But now I wanted more. I wanted dirt. So I started checking court records. Barnes had been a landlord in Chicago for over 2 decades. Surely there was something. And there was. Back in 2011, he'd been sued by a group of tenants in a different building for unsafe conditions. Mold, exposed wires, the whole deal. He settled out of court. The building sold off cheap the next year, buried under fake LLCs. That gave me an idea. I contacted a local investigative journalist I'd followed for years. She covered housing and corruption in Chicago. I sent her everything: tax records, the eviction notice, even the creepy red ink letter. She called me the next day. "This guy's got a pattern," she said. "You're not the first, but you might be the one who gets it to stick." She started working on the story. Meanwhile, I kept my head down. Rent paid. Lawyer on speed dial. But Barnes wasn't done. And what he tried next would drag this whole thing into a place I never expected. About a week after I talked to the journalist, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was a guy with a gravelly voice saying he was from the building inspector's office, and that I needed to schedule an immediate interior inspection for code compliance or face fines. That didn't feel right. I called the city directly. No inspection had been scheduled. No one from the city had called me. That's when it clicked. Barnes was trying to send fake inspectors to get into my apartment. Maybe to plant something, maybe to harass me, maybe worse. At that point, I installed a security camera in my peephole and started recording every hallway interaction. I also made sure someone was always with me if I had to go into or out of the building. I didn't feel safe. The next twist? My internet suddenly cut out. I called my provider. They said someone had called to disconnect my service using my name and apartment number. I hadn't made the call. Then my electricity was flickering at weird hours only in my unit. I asked the new building inspector who'd come by for a real inspection what might cause that. He looked around, climbed a ladder into the ceiling above the bathroom, and came back down slowly. "Your breaker's been tampered with," he said. "Looks like someone tried to rig it to cause intermittent shorts. Could have started a fire." I felt sick. Meanwhile, the journalist, her name was Tara, had found even more. Barnes had set up shell companies to hide ownership of several rundown properties all over Chicago. He'd been collecting rent while dodging maintenance, taxes, and even court summons. Tenants from 2 other buildings had reached out to her after her first tweet teasing the investigation. Now he was being watched. But when people like him get cornered, they don't calm down, they get more dangerous. That's when my apartment was broken into. I came home from getting groceries and found my front door slightly open. Nothing was stolen, but every drawer had been pulled out. My laptop was open but still there, just the screen slightly tilted like someone had looked at something. Whoever it was didn't want to take, they wanted to know. I called the police. The officer who showed up was sympathetic but blunt. "No forced entry," he said. "Might be hard to prove unless you had a camera or a witness." I showed him the peephole cam. The footage showed a man in a hoodie, face obscured, unlocking the door like he had a key. He was in and out in under 5 minutes. The cop narrowed his eyes. "You think your landlord has a spare key?" "I know he does." The officer nodded slowly. "I'll file the report. You should think about staying somewhere else for a few days." So I did. I crashed at a friend's place in Rogers Park while Tara finalized the article. She said it was almost ready to publish, and once it went live, it would bring everything into the light: the tax evasion, the shell companies, the harassment, even statements from other tenants Barnes had tried to intimidate. Then, 2 nights into my stay at my friend's, something happened that told me Barnes was desperate now. My friend's car got keyed. We hadn't posted where I was staying. We hadn't told anyone. It was clear now he was watching me. But Barnes had made one mistake. He thought I was working alone. He didn't know Tara had looped in a city councilman who was already pushing for landlord reforms. He didn't know the housing nonprofit downtown was building a case to challenge his LLCs. And he definitely didn't know that one of the former tenants he screwed over had become a lawyer. Things were boiling. But the pot wasn't just on my stove anymore. Next up, the article drops. And Barnes, he's about to find out what happens when you treat people like disposable income. The article dropped on a rainy Monday morning. I was sitting in my friend's living room with a cup of cheap coffee, scrolling Twitter, when Tara messaged me, "It's live." The headline was brutal: "Chicago slumlord dodges taxes, harasses tenants, and hides behind fake companies. We tracked him down." Within the hour, it was everywhere. Local news stations picked it up. The city councilman who'd been working with Tara tweeted a call for a formal investigation. The Cook County Assessor's Office retweeted the story with a "We're looking into this now" caption. The nonprofit tagged every building Barnes owned. It was a digital firestorm. And Barnes? He didn't take it well. He showed up at the building that same afternoon. Neighbors told me he was screaming at the news crew parked outside. He tried to kick them off the property, but they ignored him. Then, in a weird twist, he stormed into the building and collapsed. Right there on the curb. Just sat down, hands in his hair, muttering to himself. When a reporter asked him if he wanted to comment, he looked dead into the camera and said, voice breaking, "They destroyed me." And maybe he wasn't wrong. But no one felt sorry for him. He lost everything in the weeks that followed. The IRS opened a case. Turns out he hadn't just dodged property taxes, he'd been underreporting income for years. He owed hundreds of thousands in back taxes and penalties. His LLCs got frozen after city lawyers found they were part of a scheme to avoid responsibility for building violations. The city took control of his properties. New owners were brought in. One of them turned out to be a housing nonprofit that planned to turn one of the worst buildings into subsidized senior housing. And me? I thought it was over. I thought I'd feel victorious. But that's not the full truth. Here's the part one haven't told yet. When all this started, I hacked into one of Barnes's old online accounts to get some of the documents I gave Tara. It wasn't some dark web elite move, I figured out his password. It was literally Rich Barnes 1964. I didn't tell Tara how I got it. I just handed over the files. Now, maybe she suspected. Maybe she didn't. But what matters is that one of Barnes's lawyers found out and brought it up in a follow-up article, said the evidence might have been illegally obtained. Tara didn't back down. But the article was edited, and a disclaimer was added. Her outlet stood by the story, but the comments started getting messy. People started debating whether I had gone too far. And honestly, maybe I had. I still don't regret what I did. Barnes deserved every bit of it. But I learned something. When you step into the mud, you don't walk away clean. I ended up moving out of Chicago a few months later. Not because I had to, but because I needed a reset. I found a small place in Indiana, near Lake Michigan. Quiet town. I still freelance. Still pay rent. But now I read every lease like it's a war document. Sometimes people message me on Reddit asking if the story was real. If Barnes really collapsed in the street. If the IRS really took him down. If I ever faced legal trouble for hacking that account. Here's what I tell them. It's all true. Every bit of it. And sometimes, when I walk by the lake at sunset, I still hear Barnes's voice echoing in my mind. You destroyed me. Maybe I did. But the truth? He destroyed himself long before I ever lifted a finger.